Yeah, thank you very much. One of those people who are really from the domain part and the thematic part. And as was said, I was an expert with protected sites in Annex 1, and we've learned quite a lot about addressing reporting obligations already then, and then we continued this into biogeographical regions, habitats and biotopes, and species distribution. Just to give you an idea what these four themes contain, protected sites are areas designated or managed within a framework of international community and member states legislation to achieve specific conservation objectives. And then we have these biogeographical regions, areas of relatively homogeneous ecological conditions with common characteristics. It is not one specific data set, but it's a relatively broad description that you have here. I will come back to that in a minute. Habitats and biotopes, spatial environments of biotic communities and specific species. And then species distribution, a geographical distribution of occurrence of animals and plant species at locations, let me call it that way. Now I want to give you an idea of some of the important use cases that we addressed when we specified the data or the theme. Especially with protected sites, we had this example that the member states, and this is the figure on the right side, the member states, they were asked to provide INSPIRE-compliant data sets on protected sites to, for example, the EEA, where a common database for designated areas is maintained. And we thought that this could be done easily with the simple profile or a core model. I will come back to that. On the other side, I want to give you an example where it's just the other way around. With biogeographic regions, for example, we have one specific data set, the biogeographical regions that we use for the Natura 2000 and Emerald Network, which will be provided by ETCBD to the member states. And they can use the generic core model of biogeographical regions as it was specified with version 2.9. Then again, data provision by the member states for the Habitats Directive, Article 17 reporting, which is a broad reporting, but it has a spatial part where the distribution of habitat types has to be reported. Just to give you an example, I have a map from France where one specific habitat type is shown to be in the area of France, in the three biogeographical regions there, or four. There are four. And then we have almost the same thing for the species distribution, where the member states are asked to present data sets on the distribution of species using a grid cell of 10 by 10 kilometers to comply with the obligations under Article 17. Well, just a long list. As I said, the most important directives that have reporting for the themes that I just mentioned is the Habitats Directive, the Birds Directive, and I want to say that especially the obligations to provide protected sites data to CDDA is another important thing. Well, how have we addressed this thing? In the first place, protected sites. We had, as I said, I start with number 2, the IONET data provision for CDDA. This was very easy. This could be done very easily because it was the same as the core model that we thought of for protected sites, and this was could be done very easily. the Habitats Directive, we had the question, is it enough to provide simply the core data for a protected site, saying where it is and its legal act and its name, and that's it, more or less? But the use cases said, okay, there are extensive data in this so-called standard data form, which could be provided by Inspire 2. And with Annex 1 specification, we started to specify this so-called standard data form. When we finished that, the revision of the standard data form started. And so it was excluded from the specification, saying, okay, let's look at that again once a new standard data form will be adopted. And so it was outside the specification for quite a while. And last year, it was the new standard data form was adopted, and we picked that theme up and looked at the old data specification and tried to adapt this to the new standard data form to fit to the reporting obligation under the Habitats Directive, or one of the reporting obligations under the Habitats Directive. Another reporting obligation is the evaluation of Natura 2000 sites by biogeographical regions. And the next thing is, this is all Article 17 of the Habitats Directive, reporting of the habitats distribution, as I said, and reporting of the species distribution. What we did is we created a core model under these three themes, which were able to provide the data relevant for this reporting. For example, let me see what is, okay, this example I already told you that a subgroup working on the update of Natura 2000 application schema was built to update, to align this to the updated Natura 2000 standard data form. That's what I already said. Okay, I don't want to repeat myself. This is what I said. There are open issues, of course, with that. This is the example that I wanted to show. The Habitats Directive says it contains a list of biogeographical regions, and that's the same name as the name of the theme. So in the first place, we thought that is meant, but it is not meant. It is not only meant, but there are some initiatives more in Europe dealing with biogeographical regions. For example, one or the other of you might know EBONI as a big program, which has to be covered by this specification too. But we created an application schema that was generic, and this fit to the obligations under the Habitats Directive to provide such a map as you see it here in the lower right corner. And just to repeat myself, this specific data set will not be provided by the member states, but it will be provided by ETCBD. We had this, but we can, since we have a very generic data model, this biogeographic regions can also be used in the member states. For example, this is an example from Germany, where I come from, where we use the same data model to share data on the subclasses of such biogeographical regions, as we have seen in the slide before on European level. And thus we can provide, for example, distribution data referring to such national biogeographical regions using the same data model that we created also to provide data on the reporting obligations. And it's the same with the habitat distribution data on Article 17, reporting where the member states have to provide maps on the distribution of habitats. We created, again, a generic piece of data model saying, okay, if you define a habitat type and if you define a reference habitat schema, type schema, then you can provide the data using this generic piece of data model. And this is an example of North Rhine-Westphalia, Germany, where we present one habitat type from the Habitats Directive, 9160, in the area of North Rhine-Westphalia, and you see that you have even the biogeographical regions underneath. Species distribution will look almost the same. For that reason, I don't have a map of that. But species distribution, and this gives me the chance to stress that if the data model is generic enough, you can use it not only for reporting on directives or reporting obligations on directives, but for many initiatives that could use this data. If you have habitats distribution, for example, you can use this piece of data model to go to the European Vegetation Survey and say, okay, why not share your data on vegetation types using the data model created for habitat types. And this can be done very easily, and I will show that in a few months. So you have quite a number of initiatives that could be served by such a piece of data model. The colleagues from Norway, they, for example, tried this generic piece of data model for the species distribution and created distribution for this northern lapwing, just as an example, in the southern Scandinavian region. Yeah, it's then this question, having reporting obligations kept out of the implementation rule. Well, what we did is usually in the implementation rule, that is the core model of the data model, we usually have a generic model for mapping or distribution habitats or for species distribution, and just the same for biogeographical regions. And the step to become specific is that we have extensions in the application schemas which include then, for example, feature-level metadata. And the most important thing is where externally maintained code lists are addressed. So usually the core model can be used on a very generic level, and then you say for which purpose you want to use it, and you add a certain registered code list to it, and then you can provide specific data. And among all those specific data sets are those relevant for reporting. That's the main idea. For example, you can see here that we have links to very theme-specific data sets and standards that are used in the communities. Okay, that was it. Thank you very much for listening.